What we are currently experiencing here in this current reality is a lot of change. And with change, there can be discomfort, there can be fear, there can be uncertainty, there can be a lot of states that can challenge us to fall out of who we truly are, which is the infinite I am, the observer of your reality, always and forever, whether you're aware of it or not. So what this channel is all about is just helping you remember what you already know but may have forgotten, which is that you are the infinite I am, the infinite, powerful, commanding observer of your reality. And all observations and commands begin with I am. So that is what we're going to do today. We are going to be addressing what's happening in the US. So yes, this is for my US friends. However, this is also very, very relevant for anyone who is watching this video, whether you live in the US or you don't. I live in Australia, but because I'm the observer of my reality, if something's in my reality, then I am taking full responsibility for it, which is what we are going to do today. And I will say that this video is going to be uplifting. It is going to leave you lighter and feeling more empowered. If you are feeling fear or discomfort, we are going to clear that in this video so that you can really be and do what you came here to be and do at this particular time in human history. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. My name is Hedley, and if you have found your way to this channel, then you are in the right place and there is no coincidence. So thank you very much for being here. If you'd like to know more about me or my offerings, I do offer coaching for specific situations in your reality. I also have a self-concept course, a masterclass on I Am, which is what we're going to be talking about more today, and my book, I Am Money. You'll find all of those details in the box below this video, so do check that out. But if I could ask for a very simple favor, if you are enjoying this channel, if you are enjoying these videos and finding them useful, please do give this video a like and a positive comment, and make sure you subscribe to the channel, which sends the message to YouTube and to Google that yes, I want more of this empowering, amazing information that is reminding me of who I truly am, which of course is the infinite I am of reality. So I have gone for a new background today, and there is a reason why I chose this, because we are going deep today. We are taking a deep dive underneath the surface of what appears to be happening in reality, and we are going to clean a bit of shit out that is currently coming up to the surface, because what we are currently seeing, we have seen before. This is not the first time that we are currently seeing what we are currently seeing, and that is because history repeats itself, or at least the consciousness of history repeats itself in order to be revised and forgiven and healed. And that is what we are going to be doing today, and that is what this work is all about. The law of assumption is absolutely about manifesting everything that you want into your reality, whether it's a specific person reflection or a home or a car or a new job or a whatever. Yes, isn't this wonderful? And we have been afforded those luxuries and privileges and freedoms because of all of the people, all of the brothers and sisters, all of our ancestors who have come before us and fought for freedom and basic civil rights. We have been enjoying this beautiful reality for the last 90 so years because of all of those people before us who didn't have the same opportunities and the same freedoms that we have been gifted with today. And what we are seeing currently is the return of that consciousness, because consciousness cannot be suppressed. It can lay dormant for decades until something triggers it and brings it back up to the surface. So this video is going to be a little different to my other videos. I've done a lot more preparation for this one. I'm going to be using a few more slides. If you're listening to this on podcast, it is okay because I will be reading through them. But this is a really important topic because we are going to be addressing the situations that are happening in the US, in particular the one relating to the policies around diversity, equity, and inclusion that are currently being dismantled in the US. So whether you live in the US or not is irrelevant. If this is something that is in your reality, it is in your level of awareness, then as the infinite observer of your reality, we have a responsibility to it. And it's not as hard or as difficult as you think. You are going to feel more empowered. You are going to feel lighter. You are going to feel hopeful. In fact, you may even feel excited about what is happening because this stuff is coming to the surface for a reason. We're going to start with a little bit of a history lesson around DEI, and then I want to take a little trip down the memory lane of Neville's teacher, Abdullah. Now, a lot of you would know Abdullah, and we are going to just remember who Abdullah was and the role he played and the example he set. And it's such a perfect example because it fits in with this time perfectly. There's no accidents or coincidences with this. And then we are going to look at how the current reality that we are seeing got created, got manifested, and what we can do differently to ensure that history does not repeat itself. History repeats itself in order to be healed. So we are going to heal what remains unhealed, and we are going to do it with the power of I am. I'm going to make it very clear and very easy, and you are going to feel liberated as a result of it, because that's what this is all about. This is all about liberating ourselves from the perceived illusions and limitations of this third dimensional reality. That which we are experiencing is nothing more than a hologram of our own consciousness, and that includes the collective consciousness. So first of all, if you are not in the US and you are not aware of what DEI is, DEI stands for diversity, equality, and inclusion. Essentially, this is a framework and a set of practices and policies aimed at creating environments, whether in workplaces, schools, or other organizations, where all individuals feel valued, respected, and have equal access to opportunities regardless of their differences. And that is because of all of those people, our ancestors, our brothers and sisters who came before us, who lived through those times where they did not have equality and inclusion and acceptance for their differences. Now, just to give you a little reminder, the race relations back in the 1930s and the 40s. So this is when Neville Goddard was teaching. The problems of the Great Depression affected virtually every group of Americans, and it extends beyond the US. No group was harder hit than African Americans. And by 1932, approximately half of African Americans were out of work. And in some northern cities, whites called for African Americans to be fired from any jobs as long as there were whites out of work. Racial violence again became more common, especially in the South, and that was from the Library of Congress. So the roots of DEI can be traced back to the civil rights movements of the mid-20th century. During the 40s and the 50s, activists fought against racial segregation and discrimination, and there is a reason why I have put that in bold. We are going to come back to that, leading to significant legal milestones, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which in the United States was a landmark law prohibiting discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And that's from Rachel Murray from Inclusion Geeks. Continuing on, the DEI policy emerged from two executive orders. The first was an affirmative action in the United States signed by President John F. Kennedy on 6th of March 1961, which included a provision that the government contractors take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and employees are treated fairly during employment without regard to their race, creed, color, or national origin. It was used to promote actions that achieve non-discrimination. The second executive order was in September 1965 when President Lyndon Johnson issued Executive Order 11246, which required government employers to hire without regard to race, religion, and national origin, and take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and that employees are treated during employment without regard to their race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Okay. So that's a little bit of where DEI came from. It was a result or a response to the discrimination and the segregation that had been experienced in America around the 1930s and the 1940s. So there was a lot of pushback on that kind of treatment where these people who had been suppressed for so long rose up and took their power back and demanded to be treated equally and fairly and justly, and rightfully so. Now, a lot of wonderful things came out of those times, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And of course, I want to acknowledge and give infinite gratitude and appreciation to our ancestors who fought for the basic civil rights for human beings. You know, like you'd think it's a given that people are just treated respectfully, but no, not in this third dimensional reality. And of course, that is part of the setup to the awakening. We had to have the contrast. We had to have something to push back against, to know and have the experience of who we are, but more on that later. Now, during this time, this is before Neville was Neville, he was actually a student of Abdullah, as many of you would know. Now, I want to take you back through Abdullah. So Abdullah was Neville's teacher between 1929 and 1936. Now, those dates may not be entirely accurate, but that's around the time when Neville Goddard was being mentored by Abdullah, who was an Ethiopian rabbi residing in New York. Abdullah introduced Neville to the mysteries of Kabbalah, taught him Hebrew, and guided him on a profound journey of spiritual understanding and awakening. He became the teacher we know him as because of Abdullah. Now, as Neville describes, Abdullah was as black as night. And of course, they do use very old language. If you've listened to Neville, he does use old language. I'm not going to use that language because it can be offensive. So I've just taken the liberty of changing some of the language so that it's not potentially offensive to anyone. Abdullah is a really interesting character because you've got to remember, the 1930s and the 1940s was a time of incredible racial divide and segregation, in particular in the US. And Abdullah was living in Harlem, New York, which is where Neville met him. Based on Neville's account, the reality that most people were experiencing was not Abdullah's experience. And I want to just take you through some of Neville's accounts on Abdullah. This is from a question and answer session where Neville is talking about how he and Abdullah came together. So this is Neville speaking. Well, I'll tell you in detail how we got together. It was 1933. If you remember, there was a frightful depression in our country. Millions were unemployed in New York City. They were sleeping with permission of the mayor, 3 and 4 deep, as far as the eye could go. There was no place to go. I didn't have a job. I had no money, and I was living in a basement on 75th Street. And he, Abdullah, lived on 72nd Street in a very lovely home that was owned by Morkenthau, whose son Henry Morkenthau Jr., which is actually pronounced Hayri Morkenthau Jr., was then the Treasury of our country, a cabinet minister, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury under President Franklin D. Roosevelt. But his father owned the house. He didn't live there, and he rented the first floor to my friend Abdullah. Now, I want you to just think about that for a second. The son of a prominent Jewish family in the United States, Hayri Morkenthau Jr., who was the then U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, rented the first floor of his house to Abdullah. Keep that in mind, because this is telling you who Abdullah is. This part is from Abdullah, the Ethiopian mystic, the teacher of Neville Goddard. Neville stated that Abdullah was proud to be an African American and didn't want anything about him to change one bit. The time Abdullah lived in the 1920s and 30s was a time in America where blacks were heavily discriminated. Knowing himself, Abdullah never allowed anyone to refer to him as a colored man. Abdullah never felt discriminated despite the fact that he lived in the 20s and 30s when African Americans were the extreme subject of all kinds of segregation. He would attend the opera show in the front seat without any disturbance. Now we're going back to hearing from Neville, and this again is from the Q&A session where he's talking about Abdullah. I know that before the Civil Rights Bill in New York City, no African American could go to the box office and buy a seat in the orchestra. You'd get a seat in the balcony. You think Abdullah would ever let me go and buy the seats? No. Abdullah would go straight down to the box office, and he was African American, I tell you. And he'd go right down and say, I want 2 in the center. I don't want too far back, not beyond the 6th row, right in the center. Yes, sir. He would buy the 2 seats for any show. And the first opera I saw, Abdullah took me to it. So Abdullah, a black Ethiopian Jewish mystic, was the teacher of this work, and his two most well-known students are Neville Goddard and Joseph Murphy, who are two white men. There's no accidents with any of this. Abdullah knew who he was. He was human, but he was above the limitations of his humanness. There are multiple accounts by Neville and Joseph Murphy where they witnessed Abdullah being treated like royalty wherever he went. He didn't fight against anything. He was everything. He was all of it. So he is the example that we want to remember as we go through this work. Now, what we are currently seeing is we are seeing the return of the consciousness that got suppressed back in the 1950s and 60s with the Civil Rights Act. Because as wonderful as that was, you cannot slap a law on consciousness and hope that it will go away. Now, that law enabled us a wonderful period of time of almost 100 years of enjoying an assumption that people and humans should be treated equally. However, it didn't change the consciousness that led to this need for a Civil Rights Act law. What it did was it suppressed that consciousness, and that consciousness has been laying dormant until now, when we are seeing the rise of that consciousness of discrimination, inequality, and exclusion coming back up so that we can heal it once and for all. Those policies of DEI were pushing back. They were in resistance. Diversity was in resistance to discrimination. Equality was in resistance to inequality. And inclusion and inclusiveness was in resistance to exclusion and segregation. Absolutely makes sense. They were wonderful policies to put in place, a wonderful law in terms of the Civil Rights Act. However, again, you cannot slap a law or a policy over a negative or toxic state of consciousness and just hope that it goes away and disappears. Guaranteed, a suppressed consciousness that remains active is going to pop back up again, and it's going to intensify the next time round, because history repeats itself until we revise the consciousness that created history. And that is now what we are seeing with this current administration, which is bringing back very clearly, very obviously, discrimination, equality, and exclusion. And we can continue this cycle for centuries and lifetimes, because whatever you resist persists, and it is going to come back and it is going to fight back. And we just repeat that cycle. And that is what we have to stop doing. We have to stop fighting against. We have to stop resisting, because the force of resistance, the energy of fighting back, is a creative force. You are only going to create more of that which you are fighting back on. It may give you some space and it may give you a reprieve, but it doesn't cure, it doesn't solve the consciousness. Let's take a step back to the foundations of this work, which is consciousness is the one and only reality. And reality is nothing more than a reflection of our consciousness. So if we are seeing in our reality evidence of discrimination, inequality, and exclusion, that means discrimination, inequality, and exclusion must be in our consciousness, which of course it is, because we are seeing it coming back with a mighty force. Everything that we are experiencing out there, it begins with us. No one to change but self. So you want to ask yourself, am I honoring my diversity? Am I honoring everything about me that makes me different, that makes me an individual, that makes me a unique expression of I am? Am I honoring everything that makes me unique? Am I treating myself as an equal? What I mean by that is, am I seeing myself as an equivalent to every single other in my reality? And am I with myself? What that means is, am I with my maker? Am I with I am? Or have I slipped into third person thinking about them, they, he, she, or it? Am I with myself? So before we can do anything, we first have to acknowledge the truth of our current reality, which always begins with ourselves and always begins with I am. I am discriminating against myself and my individual uniqueness. I am believing myself to be either less than or better than others. I am separate from myself and my infinite I am nature. If you are seeing discrimination in your reality, it's because you have been discriminating against yourself and your own uniqueness and that which makes you a unique expression of I am. For many people doing this work, there is a common story, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm somehow less than. We unconsciously class ourselves as either less than or better than according to other people. We all do it. This is not about fault. This is not about blame. This is about awareness. And then we're going to change this story. But before we can change this story, we first have to claim it. We first have to be in command of it. Now, all of us have fallen into the victim narrative of he, she, they, and it, where we are looking outside at them and believing them to be doing it and them to be the one causing the problem. And this is because of them and they and he and she. If you are looking at him as the problem, then you are away from yourself. You are separate from self because you're in third person. You're not in togetherness with I am. I am is the observer. I am is the commander. You want to come back to I am. Now that you've got command of the story, well done. We now get to change it, and we change it from I am. I am the infinite I am of my reality, which means I'm everything. I am infinite diversity. Every single human being is an infinite expression of diversity, because that's the role of I am, is to experience itself through every single different possibility, the infinite possibilities of itself. I am is infinite equality. Every single expression, while they may not have the experience of that equality, every single expression of I am is infinitely equal because it comes from I am. The one thing that every single person on this planet has in common is I am, even if that's in a different language. And I am is infinite oneness. There is only I am. I am that I am. I am that I am. I am that I am. For you to say, well, I'm this and I'm not that, means you have just moved away from who you are, which is the infinite I am, which is infinite oneness. Now, Abdullah knew this. He was the infinite I am. He wasn't just a black man. He was a white, blue, brown, red, purple. He was all of it. He was everything. And he knew his value. He knew he was equal to everyone else, which is why he was able to be treated as royalty wherever he went, because he knew his worth and value. There was no question in it. And of course, he was one with himself. He wasn't in resistance to any part of himself. By you claiming this, you are essentially claiming the frequency of I am, which is why your presence here watching this video is really important, because you're going to take this frequency and you are then going to disperse into your reality and into your workplaces and organizations, and you're going to hold this frequency of truth, which is I am infinite diversity, I am infinite equality, I am infinite oneness. And then your realities, because you're not in resistance to the opposite, can start to reorganize itself to reflect that infinite diversity, infinite equality, and infinite oneness back through the situation, circumstances of this experience, this collective experience. Now, this has been a big video, and I want to just make one more point, and that is the etymology of these words of diversity, equality, and inclusion are awful. Whoever decided to use these specific words for this framework and policies did not understand etymology or the consciousness of language. I'm not going to go into the etymology because this video is already long enough, but the etymology of diversity comes from the consciousness of separateness. The etymology of equality comes from the consciousness of uniformity and sameness. The etymology of inclusion and inclusiveness comes from the consciousness of confinement and shutting in. These words are not great. So what I am going to do right now is, as the infinite I am of my reality, including language, I am rendering void the historical consciousness of diversity, equality, and inclusion. And I am claiming the wholeness and the consciousness of wholeness in these words, so that from here on, we are using these words for the purpose of returning to wholeness and oneness and love. So I am infinite diversity, I am infinite equality, and I am infinite inclusiveness. If you, having watched this video all the way to the end, thank you so much, take this story into your workplaces. You are not going to have to fight. You are not going to have to resist. All you have to do is remember who you are. You are the infinite I am. I am the infinite I am, and I am infinitely diverse. I am infinitely equal, and I am infinitely included in the infinite oneness and wholeness of this experience. And we all are expressions of I am. We all come from the same place, and we're all returning to that place as well. And while we're here, Our job is to remember that and to remain in the frequency of that. That is your purpose. That's why you're so necessary. That's why you're so important. And that is why you're here. So that you could remember this and take this with you and then take action from there. So rather than acting against something, you're claiming who you are, you're remembering it, and then taking action from that place of wholeness. And that action will be made known to you in the moment. We won't know it until we're in that moment where the action needs to be taken. So just trust yourself. So thank you for listening to this video all the way to the end. I know it was a big one and a long one. It was an important one because this affects all of us. And what we are currently seeing in the world, we do not have to be seeing for much longer, but we are not going to fight. We're not going to resist. We're going to neutralize with I am. And we're going to move from there. So thank you for listening. Remember who you are. You are the infinite I am. So use your infinite I am name wisely. And I will look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.